Welcome back to the Valley to Peak Nutrition Podcast. This week, we have a little bit of a different format where I become the person who gets interviewed and asks questions about the topic of nutrition. I was recently a guest on Jake Downs' podcast where he fully admits up front, I know nothing about nutrition and I have a ton of questions. So as Jake and I started diving deeper into these questions and the conversation we were having, I started thinking to myself, these are such good questions and ones that come through Valley to Peak so often that it'd be great to replay this for folks who might also have an interest in learning more about the topic of nutrition, how to stay consistent with habits, what actually matters the most when it comes to nutrition timing, nutrition in the backcountry, and so much more. So that's exactly what we did. If you want to check out a link to Jake's podcast, you can look at that in the show notes for the link. And if you have any questions about anything you hear us cover in here, don't hesitate to reach out to us at info@v2pnutrition.com. Here's Jake and I looking at how to, quote, fix him, which really highlights some of the top questions many folks have on the topic of nutrition.
This podcast is literally it's funny. I just do this podcast as a way to kill time on my drives and whatever, just kind of me ranting. When I have a guest on, which is very rare, it's somebody that I want to learn from. I don't care if some people have people on to get oh, I'm going to have Sitka on so I can get some sponsorships. That's not what I want. I want to learn. And I've been following you for a long time. And my knowledge of I'm just a moron in all things, but nutrition, I'm below moron. I don't know what that is. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to just we're going to BS a little bit. And I kind of want to tell you what I do. So I want to make fun of what I'm doing and learn how to kind of adapt things. I'm back on the diet. I'm back. I've had a bit of a hiatus here over the last couple months hunting. And that's my problem, dude. When I travel, when I get in, if I'm at home and on a normal schedule, I'm rock solid. 2 times a day I'm working out, I'm eating good. And then all of a sudden I hunt it's not a 1 week in 6 months. It's for 2 months straight. So I'm gone and then I'm back and then I'm gone and I fall apart. A wreck. And nobody can help me with that but me. I know what I'm doing. I just can't. I don't know. Do you have what's your best advice for staying on track? You have any special tidbits other than the
Yeah, I think I have a couple, right? So number one is you've your schedule, when you're going to be hunting and when you're home. And that's not just in September and August, that's throughout the year. So if you think about a 12-month period, there's a good chunk of time in there. And I know there's tags open during this time period, but for the most part, most major hunting is wound down from, call it December to July or August. Now you've got turkey season in there, you've got spring bear, you've got coos deer if you hunt, southern areas. But for the most part, the being gone for 8 weeks, living in the mountains, chasing elk and mule deer, that's wrapped up. So you have to kind of set yourself up for success. And one thing that we'll do with people is we'll have them phase their year, right, into quarters. You break it down into quarters, and each of those quarters have a focus. And from, call it August to December or January, the focus is filling tags and simply maintaining your weight. If you do that, and even if it takes you 2 years to achieve the goal, you're building up a series of consistency where from, August, September through December, I'm just trying to be intelligent, maintain where I'm at, so that when it comes back to January to June, I'm at home more. There's a little more consistency. I can be a little more focused. I can train a little more specifically, and I'm able to then make more progress. So you look at it like a stair step. You've got a period of time where you're making some progress. You got a period of time where you're maintaining. And what you're preventing from going back and gaining and losing the same 10 pounds every single year for the next 10 years. you're always making progress. So like a question that people will always ask is like, well, what's the fastest way to get to my goal weight? And I give the same answer every time. The fastest way is to never go backwards. If you're gaining and losing the same 10 pounds for 5 years, like that's just, it's going to take you forever. But if you lose 10 pounds in a year and you manage that 10 pounds, and then you lose another 10 pounds, and then you manage that 10 pounds, I mean, before you know it, the same 5 years you've just wasted gaining and losing the 10 pounds, the same 10 pounds, now 5 years later, you're 50 pounds done. And I think that a major, major, major component, you alluded to this whenever you'd ask the question, a major component of maintaining during that busy season, call it October to December, is you're just, I don't even like being this rude, but I'll just do it. You're not being an idiot when you're on the road, right? Like 99% of the time when we meet with people, they almost always say, I know what I need to be doing. And when it comes time for that period or that stretch that we've planned for maintenance of what you've already lost, you are doing what you know you should be doing. You're not going to the drive-through or the gas station or insert your kryptonite and being like, oh, it's hunting season, I'll burn it off, or man, I don't really care. You're still making the hard decision of, all right, look, my goal this year to prevent this insanity of the same gain and loss is to maintain. So yeah, I am going to exercise the same discipline. What's so interesting to me about you and this being like you didn't necessarily say this verbatim, but kind of what you're saying is with this being such a challenging thing for you to conquer is you're so disciplined. Like you're so disciplined in your training. I've seen you on social media. You're so disciplined in honing your craft and shooting your bow. I don't know a guy who hunts more and fills more tags than you. You're so disciplined and so structured in so many areas. But the nutrition one is so darn hard, man, because cravings are real. There's no real negative outcome to it. Like, yeah, like, I'd like to lose 10 to 15 pounds, but it's not really preventing me from doing anything that I want to do. So what's the big deal if I go back for 4 more dilly bars for the rest of the drive or whatever, right? But that consistency and having a pattern, I think, is huge. And I think that what I see pop up the most often is people have this idea of I want to lose weight, and that's about where it stops. There's no game plan, there's no structure to it. They don't know what that looks like. They don't know how to measure it. They don't know how to implement it. They don't know where to start. And so they're always just swinging for the fences, which is generally following some influencer's short-term plan. It'll work a little bit. Very rarely is it consistent and almost always results in going backwards, if not backwards plus some. So that's probably more than you bargained for in asking that, but that's exactly what we, set out to plan with people.
No, dude, that's awesome. And see, what I like about you is, so if anybody doesn't know, you were like fat at one. We're just gonna get real. Like you were fat, like
I was a
right?
big guy, yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
how fat were you? I'll tell you what I was. I was 270.
that's what I was.
Okay, me and you. And okay, and as a former fat guy, like, dude, I'm an athlete when it comes to falling off the wagon. Like I like you say lose and gain 10 pounds. Like I'll lose and gain 25 in a month. Like I'm a psycho. And I know it's terrible. But what I like about you is you have that like you said, I am very disciplined in work, in hunting, in everything, working out. Like I said, I can force myself on a hunt. Seriously, I can force myself, and I'm talking hunting. Like, here's the thing that people don't understand: there's mountain hunting, and then there's hunting, and a lot of the percentage of hunting, once you get past that September and even October time frame, especially since I live in Nebraska, I mean, I'm on to whitetails and more travel type hunts. Yes, they might be somewhat physical. Sometimes they're not physical at all. Okay, so those type of hunts is where it really falls apart. And I can force myself on a whitetail hunt to go and run for 5 miles. I'll go run 5 miles, and then I will come back and I will eat 12,000 calories. Like, I just can't handle, for whatever reason, my brain will not. And I know better. I know better. But once I let myself, that I'm an all in type of guy. Like if I'm all in, I'm all in. Or if I'm all out, I am gone. I am eating 12 donuts a day. Like that's how I roll. And I know what to do. I know the advice. It's all up here, but I'm not
Yeah.
listening. You know what I mean?
I think I think that you are similar to a lot of people in the sense of it can be all or nothing, right? And the phrase that I just love, got it pinned on my board over here next to in my office, and just truly try to live everything by is I'd rather be consistently good than occasionally great. And I think that in a world where everybody's broadcasting their lives on all over the internet, and of course they're only broadcasting great stuff, and of course that is, you know, just how hard I can be. And look at me running at 4 a.m. and look at me doing all of these hard, challenging things, right? It puts in the mind of average people like myself, average guys, right? We work a job, we have kids, we have a wife, we're trying to work so that we can go do things that we want and provide for our family. We're not professional athletes, we're not professional influence, we're none of those things. But the idea that it's created is that if I want to be like that, I have to achieve perfection, right? I have to achieve perfection. And what I have seen with the people that we work with and what I really try to implement is if you can find that point that is like the minimal amount that you can achieve for an effective dose, the minimal effective dose. In other words, it's the bare minimum that's going to move the needle rather than thinking it's got to be absolute perfection and optimization of this and maximization of it. Like it doesn't have to be. And for a vast majority of us, little bitty changes done over and over and over and over again breeds pretty profound results. And I think that what I've seen in doing this is a lot of people are so paralyzed to do anything because they can't do it, you know, to 100%. They don't have 2 hours to go work out. They can't eliminate an entire food group. It's like, why even try? Like, why even try to reduce my portions? Why try to work out for an hour if I can't get in too? And in reality, like reducing your portions and working out for an hour, that's going to get you pretty far. And I think aiming for that minimum effective dose, being consistently good instead of occasionally great, that is like that needs to be the new mantra. And I think it would help a ton of people start moving the ball down the field in terms of their goals.
Oh, dude, that's awesome. Yeah, like it is. It's so much harder. I'm a like I can out eat all my fat friends, all of them. Even when I'm even right now or when I'm lower in weight, you know, like we go out to eat and I can. And I don't know. Have you ever honestly in how long ago was it that you lost all that weight? And I mean, it was way back, wasn't it? Like you went
15, 16 years ago, something like that.
Have you slipped much since then?
No. Now, like, well, I'm gonna bring this full circle. I wrote an article on this where people ask me that a lot. Actually, like, has there ever been a point where you'll slip? And I never did. And because why? The reason why, like, in my head, it wasn't about the calories that I would have taken in. It wasn't about any of that. For me, it was one slip meant this gets a foothold over me. And that was something I couldn't live with. I couldn't live with the idea that this had control over me. So more than anything, that was what drove me not to do it more than the calories. Now, and then with that said, in terms of slipping, I haven't slipped, but I do at birthdays, Thanksgiving, Christmases, 4th of July's, barbecues. I do eat whatever I want. Cake, piece of cookies, extra ham or mashed potato. I plan for it though. And I, you know, if there's 10 days a year that I do that, that means the other 355 days of my year are pretty close to what my nutrition goals are. I could care less about those 10. So I don't see those 10 days of having a lot higher calorie intake as slipping. I planned them and I'll keep planning them. frankly, planning them helps the other 355 not seem that challenging, right? And so I think that there's this is a whole spectrum. Like, even as you asked me that, I'm thinking of all sorts of things. I've also learned about it a lot about nutrition, obviously over the years through professional experience, but also just in my own personal experience. And like, I think one of the things that we've talked about personally is one of our MOs, our approach to nutrition is that, like, you're never going to hear me telling a guy not to eat pizza. So if I want a slice of pizza, I'm not slipping by eating one. Now, I
Right.
don't go throw down 9 slices like I used to, but maybe now it's a slice or two. Sometimes, like, if we make a pizza and there's leftovers, maybe it's a couple days in a row, but I fit it within my budget. And I think that that's one of the things that has it helped me not to slip. It's like, what am I slipping to? If I want a burger, I'm going to go make a burger. If I want pizza, I'm going to have pizza. I take my son every other Friday to get donuts. I mean, there's right. And so when you operate out of that mentality, because you understand nutrition, there's nothing to slip to. If you want it, you include it, you figure out how to budget. And if you want it 300 days a year, then eat it 300 days a year.
Yeah. Well, I like that idea. I guess I'm, I might be just more of an addict than, well, no, I'm just weak minded, I think, in that. I
Well,
mean,
let me say this too. Sorry to interrupt you, but as you went there, I thought of this. When I was losing weight, there was a period of time where I didn't let myself have that stuff
mhm.
because it was hard for me to control. So it was better for me during that period of time to really try to get a grip on my habits and my behaviors, and I didn't have it. What was interesting to me is that during that, call it 12 months, we would start going to barbecues, and obviously people could see when you lose 100 pounds, like, you look different. And people would make comments like, man, I just wish you were so disciplined, because on my plate would be like salad and some fruit and a hamburger, right, instead of all of the cookies and chips and potato salad and stuff, which I still love those things, by the way. Say, man, you're so disciplined. And I would often, like, think in my head and started to say eventually, you're really giving me too much credit. Like, this is actually what I want. If you were to spread this out and ask me what looks good here, this is what I would tell you now looks good. So my tastes, desires changed over time, right? And to the point of where whenever I started to have kids and pizza with them and chips or whatever with them, it wasn't as difficult for me to control, because in all honesty, like, I didn't want more than a slice or two, because I really would rather have these foods that I've learned to like through the years of, just relying on them so much.
When I've heard that too, like people are like, oh, I don't even crave, cookies anymore. And I'm like, I just don't know if I would ever get to that point. I mean, we eat pretty healthy. Like, honestly, most of the time we eat healthy. It's just life is busy. You just get lazy and you're like, ah, I don't even want to clean up the house, and I don't want to make a meal. And there is an option, but it's like, let's just go out to eat. And then it kind of snowballs. It can snowball on, at least for me. And so you're eating out more, I mean, but I did 75 hard, and I did all basically cut out pretty much all processed sugar, processed things. We were eating mostly meat, vegetables, fruit. Pretty much that's it. And my wife was making a little bit of sourdough bread, and I was tracking for the most part. But there were certain days where I mean, even during the 75 hard, I would eat an excess of calories just because I needed it. Like, I felt like there was days where I would eat, like, she would make sourdough waffles, and I would eat those with peanut butter, natural peanut butter, which I know isn't, but it doesn't have the sugar in it. It's just peanuts, crushed peanuts, and then natural maple syrup. And I would eat a lot of it. And then I would almost just feel like Superman. And then the next day on my training, I would be way more performance, but then I would cut it back again, and I know, like, you have talked about how to stage your carbs and when to eat carbs. I don't really know what I'm asking, but, like, my biggest thing is I don't know how to pay attention to my body. Like, I'm just one of these guys that's like, all right, I need to lose some weight. So I know what I need to do. I'm just going to eat, proteins, and I'm just going to kind of watch my macros, kind of focus on protein and cut out my processed sugar, and then I lose weight. And if I track and I do 2,500 calories or whatever, 2,700 calories, I lose weight because I'm a pretty active guy. What I would like to get to the point where I could actually like know what my body wants, when it wants it, and be able to eat a donut and not eat seven cookies later in the day because I've let myself go, first thing in the morning or whatever. Not that I don't know. I guess what are your because you have a little different view on carbs, and as a nutritionist, like a lot of these guys, and I get it, like the American diet is set just to make us want it. You know what I mean? Like maybe like my kids they don't even want to go out to eat at certain places. And I think we like instill that in our children. I don't know if what you think about that, I guess.
About which part of it?
Well, there's a lot in there. So let's start with the carbs. Talk about what you think about like just macros. Like what is your idea on
Yeah.
tracking?
Well, I mean, like you said, your take is different on carbs than others, and that's probably true just because I think that we should eat them. It seems like anymore, like anybody who wants to suggest nutrition has to say go no low carb, and that's just not true. So the way that we view and talk about nutrition specifically as it relates to the macros is each of the three macros, carbs, proteins, and fats, they basically have one function in human physiology and human performance, right? Each one has its own job. And the game becomes dosing each of those so they can accomplish the job for each person doing what they want. So, like, take carbs, for example. The predominant role of a carbohydrate is to fill the muscle up with fuel so that when you go train, when you go walk your kids into school, when you climb a flight of stairs, whatever, there's energy in the muscle so that you can perform that activity at its highest potential. If you're dosing the amount of carbohydrate that you eat in a day to do that, then in an appropriate amount, then you're going to be able to perform well, but it's not going to be in excess to the point of where it's causing you to put on weight. Excess calories from any macro, including protein, causes weight gain, not excess calories from carbohydrates alone or whatever else. The problem where this became a problem, especially in the US, is that what's in our food system, what's most popular in our food system, tastes really, really, really good. And it's really, really, really easy to pile in a lot of carbohydrate in a very small package. So I'll give you an example in a second. And the trouble is that we're not eating because we're hungry. We're eating because it tastes so good. So you wind up with 3, 4, 5, 6 times the amount that your muscle needs, not because your body needed it. It just tastes good. So you keep eating it, right? That's called, we have a fancy term we use for that called hyper palatable food, because palatable meaning tasty, hyper meaning a lot, because it's a lot of tasty food. Right now, if you were to take like your average 20-ounce soda, there is, I believe, around 240 calories in that, which is about 60 to 70 grams of carbohydrate. If I were to put in front of you a plate that had a really large sweet potato, an apple, a piece of chicken, and a large salad covered the plate, there's a likelihood that you might not even be able to eat all of that. The carbohydrate content on that plate would be similar to what's in that soda. Some of us drink soda driving between appointments, right? And so if you think about that, and there's no satiety, it doesn't fill you up in the moment, it doesn't fill you up after the fact, but we typically have soda with a hamburger and fries. So now you've taken our example of the sweet potato, the piece of fruit, the salad, the chicken, or whatever lean meat you want to talk about, at 60 grams of carbohydrate. And now lunch is 240 or more grams of carbohydrate because it just tastes good. And it's a lot in a small package, right? So, like the phrase that we use the most often in our program and podcast and all of that is, it's the dose that makes the poison. We have come to have this message of everything is, everything with a certain ingredient in is bad, and all of these foods are really good. There's nothing good or bad. There's nothing that's going to just in and of itself kill you when it comes to nutrition. What kills us is how much we eat. And the dose of that, whatever it is, good or bad, is what's going to make the poison. What's good about, whole foods, natural foods, quote unquote, and I hate this term, clean foods, is you're probably not going to eat 25 apples in a sitting. You're
Right.
probably not going to eat an entire case of baked potatoes with nothing on them, plain baked potatoes or plain sweet potato. You're probably not going to eat that. You're probably going to eat one and think, I do not want anymore because it's filling. Right. And so that's the difference in where we get this message of like, well, all carbs are bad. Look at all the obesity that carbohydrate intake is causing, and carbohydrates are inflammatory and blah, 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 blah. No, we eat too much of them because we're not eating to taste and appetite. We're eating because they taste good. And so that's the biggest conundrum in the messaging with carbohydrates, and where we've gotten so lost in, well, all carbs are bad, where it's like they're not. We have no literature when people isolate carbohydrates from quality sources to where it's causing any of the problems everyone's saying. And in fact, even when you isolate ingredients that, like, use high fructose corn syrup, for example, when you isolate that in a setting, a controlled setting, and a person's calories are controlled, in other words, the dose is correct, we don't find all of these bad things happen at all. We find that happen only whenever calories are in excess. And so, like, but no one tells you that online because it doesn't make that good of a post, right? So it is such a bigger topic than, oh, let's condemn this food. Let's just condemn this food. This food's the problem. Look, all foods that have this nutrient in it are the problem. And that's not true. We do not find that whenever someone controls the dose. And so you rewind back to all my comments earlier about how we feel like you can include anything in your diet so long as the dose is controlled. And that's exactly what we find. We find that if people can control the dose and you give them autonomy, you give them the option to choose how they want instead of mandating that they eat foods they hate, they are now all of a sudden allowed or able to be, and this is kind of a sterile term, but they're able to be adherent to that diet. And if they're doing something that they don't really hate, they're going to be consistent. And then this goes back to, I'd rather be occasionally good than consistently great, or I'd rather be consistently good than occasionally great. If they can be eating those foods and be consistent, and now all of a sudden they're consistently in a deficit by eating a slice of pizza every day, maybe, they're going to lose weight, even eating pizza. And that's not only what we see like in science and studies and kind of the nerd stuff, but that's what I've seen observationally in doing this. And it's just like such a weight off of people's shoulders to find out they don't have to adhere to this influencer crazy mega diet where the dietitian comes into the house and throws away anything that tastes good and then restocks it with all of this green stuff. Like, you don't have to. I mean, there's good things about green stuff, but it also doesn't mean that you've got to go to the other end of the spectrum and like hate your life and what you're eating because of it.
Yeah, I don't believe the whole no carbs thing. I've done it and it works. I mean, it works in the fact that you're eating a lot of protein, and so you're just not. I have come to the realization there may be something in the science that but if you are in a deficit, you will lose weight. Like all these diets just put people in a deficit. I think. I don't think there is a magic sauce beyond if you're burning more calories than you're eating, you're going to lose fat, right? I mean,
100% right. 100% right.
So, and honestly, for me, if I don't eat carbs, like even today, like, and sometimes we eat a lot of meat, like you do. I hunt, we eat. I like meat. Meat is something that's filling to me. when I'm at home. It's something I use to kind of fill me up so I don't eat, cookies or whatever afterwards. But if I eat a lot of meat like I did for lunch today, like I don't feel quite as good if my protein is way higher than my carbs if I'm tracking.
Yeah.
Workouts aren't as good, like I was saying earlier about the waffle thing. If I keep it pretty equal, like honestly, I don't really know, but like the little pie chart on my tracker is like like it's pretty even between fats, carbs, and it's not even percentages. I don't know how they do it, but I have to look. I'm gonna look. But what do you recommend? I mean, don't give away all your secrets, but what do you think a good percentage of fats to carbs to? And you've probably said this a million times, but what do
Yeah,
you
I
think?
have. It's not giving away any secrets at all. But to go back to your comment, like, so let's talk about protein. We talked about the carbohydrate piece. So in the carbohydrate piece, I suggested, look, that's the thing that's going to basically fuel the muscle. And so if you're not eating any carbohydrate, you go to run, you go to do any of your training like you're talking about, and you just have this flat effect. That's why. The other thing to keep in mind is this: is that if you've got a really, really high protein intake, very little carbohydrate intake, the body is going to find a way to create what it needs. It will take that protein and convert it into some carbohydrate in the liver so you can function. Now, it's not optimal, so you feel flat, but it's going to find a way to convert that. The other piece is that if you're in a deficit, there's very little carbohydrate intake, plenty of protein to spare because it seems like everybody and their mom is high protein, low carb, high protein, low carb. It's going to take that protein, not necessarily preserve the muscle integrity or the integrity of the muscle, but use it as fuel. So in the logic person's mind, you would be better off to dose your carbs for an amount of your training and then get, your protein in where you needed it to be. I don't think that there is a magical split. And the reason why is because everyone's going to be different. We could line 10 people up and you'd have 10 different answers where you've got some people allocating 25% of their carbohydrate of their diet's carbs, some people dedicating 30, some 50, some 60, some say everybody's going to be different, right? I think like what you're describing is a fair place to start where it's all even. You're getting some carbs, you're getting some protein, you're not restricting any nutrient, you're not, necessarily trying to overdo any nutrient either, but just trying to find like your average even split is an excellent place to start, and then you can adjust from there.
Well, yeah, and like we eat. It's not like I see. I don't get all into the science of every day is different for me. Like it's just whatever I decide to eat, and I just try to make the good decision of meat and try to get most of my carbs from like you said, potatoes or like at lunch. I always have protein, some sort of protein, meat, and then I do a salad. And honestly, I like a salad. I mean, I put dressing on it. I'm not crazy, but I like a salad with some meat. And so sometimes my lunch ends up being kind of low carb. And then I don't, then I kind of have to adapt. Maybe I'll have an apple in the afternoon. What do you think about like training wise? So we're kind of jumping around a bunch, but my biggest question is, everybody's like, oh, you've got to have this before you train, before you do it, or after you do it, you're supposed to do this to build the muscle back up. Is there some things that a guy should be doing as far as?
Well, that can get technical in regards to it's going to depend on a lot on the individual, a lot of their training schedule, and much of like their training. Like to really be able to answer that, you've got to look at total time that they're training because the longer you train, the more that becomes relevant. You have to look at the intensity of the training. The more intense the training, the more that becomes relevant. But for your average person, right, who is just trying to knock out 45 minutes of activity, whether that's lifting or quote cardio or whatever, you do not need to worry about the timing of the nutrients. We once thought that there was this, what we called the window of opportunity for nutrients, meaning if you ate within 60 minutes of working out, it ushers protein into the muscle, thereby recovers that muscle better and maximizes your gains from the workout, to the point of where like some people felt like, if I don't get that in, it basically renders my workout useless. And we know that's simply not true, especially if a person's nutrition is dialed over the day. If your nutrition's not dialed in over the day, there is a greater risk that you're not achieving potential. The one of the greatest cases of irony right now in the world of nutrition is all of this emphasis on fasting. When you look at performance and you look at building muscle and you look at training, the absolute worst thing you can do is fast, is to eliminate or delay the delivery of nutrients into the muscle. Right now, there's a lot of reasons why. Like, I'll just give you one. For example, eating carbohydrate near your workout signals the muscle to stop breaking down and to begin growing. But we want to fast forever, right? We want to train fasted, and then we want to. God, now it's grown to like 72-hour fast, and so it's like, okay, well, maybe the scale's moving. There's a pretty high likelihood that what's moving is muscle because you're not eating anything and you're in such a severe deficit that the body's got to use something for fuel. And so it's just like it's sort of is it's sort of mind-boggling to me to look at what's popular right now, to know the science of it, to know what people's goals are, and to realize like that's the complete antithesis of what you want to do. And so if people are paying attention to some of the basics with nutrition each day, you don't need to worry about the window of timing. What are the basics? Have protein, have carbohydrate, eat regularly throughout the day, train hard, rinse and repeat. That's the basics. And if you're doing that for the most part, then you are going to move the ball down the field towards whatever your progress is.
I this is why I wanted to talk to you. Like, I think your message is honestly, you're like the only guy that I've ever seen that's not just hating on this or hating on that. You're just like, look, live a life, eat what you want, but watch what you're eating, pay attention, and live life. Like, it's so simple that I truly appreciate what you're doing. More people need to hear that message, because I get sucked in and I know better. Like, I know how it works. Like, I've seen behind the curtain of the hunting industry, and yikes. And I know that every industry is the exact same way. All these, I mean, how many of these influencers are talking about, I only eat steaks and then have 2 cookies every night after their steak? I mean, how many? How many of them are on steroids? You know what I mean? Like, I don't really care if it helps you. Like, if it helps you justify, maybe it helps you stay on track. Because that's me. Like, the fasting thing, that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about. Does it actually do anything? Because that's the thing. People are like, oh, even intermittent fasting. And I don't, there's all these benefits that they talk about beyond losing weight. And maybe there is some truth to that. But honestly, for me, if I do the intermittent fasting, like it just gives me a say, okay, you got to quit eating at 8, like quit eating, stop it. You're done. And then I don't eat till noon, let's say. And that's not like a long fast like you were talking about, but intermittent fasting. Then the rest of the day, I can eat kind of what I want and still stay under what my calorie goals for the day are. Like, I'm not hungry I'm hungry up until I eat, but it allows me to eat more on the few meals that I get. So is there actually any benefit to?
No, not beyond what you're saying in terms of if the structure allows you to adhere to your calorie goals easier, which makes you more consistent at being in a deficit or maintenance, and that allows you to be the weight you want to be, the structure can be valuable, because that will, right? If you limit the window of opportunity, you get larger meals. If my calorie goal every day is 1600 and I have 6 hours to fit that in, that's two 800 calorie meals. And that might be easier for someone than four 400 calorie meals, right? So it's structured. Now, the what you will hear most often talked about with intermittent fasting and the value is autophagy, which we won't go completely down that rabbit hole, but basically what they're saying is it keeps you young, right? Keeps you younger longer. It allows for cellular regeneration, cellular waste to be empty, blah 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 blah. The question that you've got to ask yourself is, okay, but does any other method do that too? Right? Is this the only way to achieve that? Right? Number one. And or is there other methods? And what we find is that anyone in a deficit achieves autophagy regardless of the modality. It doesn't have to just be fasting. So you can't necessarily say, oh, well, fasting is the only way to achieve that, thereby fasting is the more superior method. We don't see that. The number two thing you've got to ask yourself is, do I want to live that long? Like, even if it does achieve this, this master cellular regeneration or whatever. And let's say, and I'm being somewhat facetious here and using like dramatic phrasing just to drive the point home. And made you be, instead of living to the average age of 80, it allowed us to live to 105. You may be alive at 105, but everything else is 105 too. You're not hunting at 105. Your bones aren't great. Your heart's not great. Everything keeps getting older. And so you may be alive, but your kids might not be. And so you're at your house in this autophagy state. And congratulations, you made it to 105, but that's not necessarily quality. So, I mean, I'm being a little bit on a soapbox here, but the idea is that any state of calorie restriction, regardless of the method, is going to provide the same value across the board for the most part, right? I'm sure there's nuances that exist. You can cherry pick any study to say anything you want, but when you are in a science-based field, you can't cherry pick things. You have to look at the sum of the parts. What does everything largely pointing to here when you look at everything? I could find any study with one person that says this is superior, but I don't really care about that one person. I care about big studies done over long periods of time. And when you study those things, we find that anyone who's in a state of calorie restriction generally gets the same improvements, that no matter the method of anyone. So no, the only time that I would say that it's advantageous is, yes, if the structure of it allows you to adhere to a deficit easier, or maintenance easier, or surplus easier, or whatever your goals are easier, then the structure alone is worth doing it, right? And for a lot of people, they'll see success in weight loss following that because there's parameters there. It's 6 p.m. I might want that tub of ice cream, but I'm not going to have it because that's my cutoff window. It's 10 a.m. I would really like to go get some donuts on my way to work, but my window of eating doesn't start until noon. Then you go to work and you've got whatever it is that you've prepped at work, which happens to probably be, quote, healthier and lower in calorie. And so you wind up with lower calories in a smaller window of time. You're not opening up, you're not open up to anything that you want to eat at any point during the day. So it naturally, for most people, reduces calorie intake. And if the structure helps, sure, go for it. Absolutely. Part of this is just that. It's finding something you like. Because if you like it, you're probably going to do it. And if you like it, you're probably going to be consistent. And if you're consistent, you will no doubt see success, no matter how you do it. You could do the craziest thing on the planet and the most balanced thing on the planet from a nutrition standpoint. If you're consistent and it's different than what you were previously doing, it is 99 times out of 100 going to produce some results, at least initially. Making that push to the final goal could be challenging. You may have to get more specific and more nuanced at that point. But, by and large, anything that's different than what you'd previously been doing is more than likely going to move the ball.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what do you think about, like, what is a targeted deficit? I mean, so let's talk about, like, okay, somebody that wants to lose some weight, like everybody, when I was doing 75 hard, was like, well, what is your goal weight? I'm like, at this point, I don't have, I've got, I've been a fatty for so long. Like I'm thinning down, but I've still got a lot of fat around my belly. Like I've never had abs. Like I guess my goal is to get abs, to keep going and get abs, which I failed at that. But I don't really know once you get down to a certain weight what a guy wants to do. Like, do you go from losing weight, being in a certain amount of deficit, to now not being in much of a deficit? Do you always want to be in a little bit of a deficit? What's the
No, so we run our program, like our one-on-one coaching folks, through a three-phase program. We have an audit phase, we have a goal phase, which if the goal is weight loss or, composition change or fat loss, you're in a restriction in that phase. But then we have a third phase called maintenance. So the idea that most people fall prey to is that if I achieve my desired composition eating in a restriction of, call it 1700 calories, that's my number. That's the number that I need to be at, for life. That's why I've not been able to ever achieve this, because I've never been that low. That's not true. In the maintenance phase, we do two things. One, we try to put distance between the tools that we've used to get here. So we try not to track and measure anymore. At this point, you should have such a good understanding of nutrition. We give you some additional tools that allow maintenance to be a lot easier once you get there. But two, and maybe most important, is we bring calories up. So like, I'll give you an example. When I was losing 270, like one of my lowest intakes was, 1300 calories or so. My maintenance now, weighing the same, is 23 to 2500 per day, but my weight has stayed the same. So there's kind of and I don't want to overstate this or make it seem like it's mythical or mystical, but there's a process and a structure that you follow that over time you increase calorie intake, and it allows you to have a higher calorie ceiling without putting additional weight on. And as you can imagine, this goes back to the start of kind of our interview and your questions. As you can imagine, it's a lot easier to maintain your weight whenever you have a ceiling of 2500 calories versus 13. And I think it's a step that most people miss. And what tends to happen when you stay in a deficit that long is it makes maintaining that weight extremely challenging. And it also lowers your metabolism, which only compounds the challenge there. And so now you're like stuck in a deficit. Your metabolism is lower as your body tries to adapt to that deficit. And you're just kind of walking around eating chicken and lettuce, feeling miserable. And all the while thinking this is what you have to do, and you don't. So there's a maintenance phase. So to answer your original question, no, you don't just stay in restriction and a deficit forever. Eventually, you don't want this to be a focus of your life. Eventually, you just want to live normal and eat the same amount and go live your life to where you're not even really thinking about this. But there is some structure and steps until you get to that point. And, sometimes that can be tough for your average person with maybe not a lot of information on how to do that, or guidance or accountability. And that's what we try to provide. Like one of the things that we tell people in the beginning, or I tell people in the beginning, is the hardest part about this is going to be the 5 inches between your ears. It's not going to be the restriction. It's not going to be the tracking. It's not going to be the measuring. It's not going to be whatever. It's going to be between your ears. It's a fight in your mind. And it's pulling up to the gas station after a hunt and wanting to buy the entire lot of Pop-Tarts instead of grabbing one baggie and a bottle of water that you're combating in those moments, right? And so, sure, I'm in a chair giving you suggestions, giving you guidance, giving you some structure, giving you a game plan, but you have to then go execute it. And that's the hard part, right? I'm passionate about it. So people hear some of this and they're like, oh yeah, this sounds good. And then you pull to the drive-thru and you're like, God, this sucks. And it's those moments of making the call that lines up with your goal instead of what you want in the moment that makes or breaks whether or not you get to the goal. And, for a lot of people, there's a lot of those moments in a week, and it can be tough. It can be tough.
Man, it is tough. And so how many calories do you think you burn in a day? Like how many What do you think you're burning in a day if you're only eating 2,500 calories?
No idea. And I don't care. No idea. I don't care. Like, that's the other thing that, I don't care about wearables telling me how many calories I expend during a training session or what my baseline metabolic rate is. We are using with people real time data and adjusting off of that. So there's a check in process that they follow where they'll check in every week or every other week, or, occasionally we'll have people who check in once a month or once a quarter for people who have been with us for a long time. But I'm using a lot of different data to guide my suggestions on their nutrition. And a lot of that is because those wearables, they can take into account age, they can take into account height, they can take into account weight, they can take into account heart rate and what the average person at that age, height, weight, and heart rate might burn. But they don't take into account the most important factor, which is you. Your
Yeah.
genetics, your unique ability, how well trained you are, which factors into whether or not you're burning a ton of calories in 30 minutes or very little. So to take that data and try to make a math equation out of it, which is what most people are doing nowadays and what most online calculators are doing, is, in my opinion, a very faulty, fragmented, discouraging process. Because in your mind, you're like, well, this is a math equation. This should be working out. I should be 25 pounds lighter than I am right now.
Right.
It's like, in theory, that works really well. But unfortunately, that's not necessarily how the body works, is just off of a math equation. Math equations give us some good ideas, but they're not necessarily going to tell all. You have to evaluate a person for that.
Yeah.
Now, earlier, like I said, for a lot of people, just starting is going to move the needle. I mean, anything that you do that is different than what you used to do is going to move the needle. But after that initial progress stops, then you may want to look deeper, right? And for a lot of people, those are the type of folks that we'll typically work with.
So you said the wearables. So my wife has the same watch as me. It's just older, and her calorie burn on certain workouts is always like really low. So I was like, let me try it. So we switched. I wore her, she wore mine, and her calories, the percentage, mine went way down, and hers went up. So I know they're BS. I use mine more as like a baseline of, I know when I'm being like, when I have a normal, active, pretty hard day, and then when I have a day where I don't do much, it goes way down. So I use it more as like if I'm not where I normally am, I try to bump it up. Use it as just a scale on myself. I don't actually look at it and say, "Oh, I burned 3,500 calories. I can eat 3,500 calories or whatever." Usually I don't do that. Do you just base I mean, you said you eat about 2,500 calories a day, but you don't really track it. You kind of know what you're eating, and so you know where you're at. Do you actually, if you have an intense day, do you just know you need to bump it up because of the way you feel, or do you just keep it, keep a deficit?
Yeah. So, I mean, I spent years tracking it. It's my job. So, although I might not be using an app, I've got a pretty good idea to the calorie where I sit every single day. I'm also small, man. I'm 5'6", 145 pounds. It doesn't take a lot of food for me to function at baseline. I train or work out or whatever word you want to put to it about 6 times per week. Sometimes it's pretty intensive, but a vast majority of my year isn't really intensive. Like, if we do the death hike every year with the guys at EXO, that tends to be a pretty intensive block, and I might increase it a little bit before hunting kicks off. But for the most part, like, I'm just trying to maintain, be a good dad, run a business, and be a good husband. I don't have time to go out for 5 hour zone 2 runs and rides multiple times per week. I'm not a pro athlete. I'm a dad.
Yeah.
Right. So during those more intensive sessions, then I'm going off of a couple things. One, part of my higher intake is in the training. If training is going to be 2 hours, 3 hours, very rarely does it ever go over that. Very rarely is it even ever that. But when it is those higher blocks, like training for the death hike, for example, I eat during it. So my calorie intake might jump out to 2,800 for the day or 3,000, with a big majority of those coming during the training itself. The other piece is like, if I know that I've got 16 weeks of training that's progressively getting more difficult, I'll notice it in my appetite and I will eat more. I'll eat more. Now, typically where someone will go wrong is they may give that as the reason for more donuts and ice creams and cookies and these other things. And like I said earlier, like I don't want those things. So for me, it becomes more chicken or a second taco, or 6 ounces of elk meat instead of 4, or an extra baked potato, or an extra bowl of oatmeal, or more pineapple and watermelon along with dinner. So it's things that are, I'm eating more, but my calorie intake isn't shooting up to 4,000. It's shooting up to 28 instead of a baseline of 25, right? And so I think that that's an important piece to make. I could, instead of eating a lot more, like, I'll just use the term healthy. I don't think that there's healthy and unhealthy food, but that's something people are familiar with. I will choose to eat a lot more healthy food than just a little bit more unhealthy food. And what I've seen observationally over the years is when training gets difficult, people will use that as an excuse to eat a lot more unhealthy stuff and drink more beer. And like we live in Pacific Northwest, where there's like, we've experienced tremendous growth of people moving up here, and there's cycling clubs and mountain biking clubs and trail running clubs. And the irony, the funny thing that I sometimes see is like they all end at a brewery and people like just drinking IPA after IPA after IPA. And, I get to hear stories from people and they're like, I just don't understand. Like I'm putting in 50 miles a week. I don't understand why I can't lose weight. I'm like, because there was 4,000 calories of IPA and then burgers and fries twice a week after those runs. So, energy expenditure and energy intake is an important thing to think about, whether your goal is weight maintenance or putting on muscle or gaining weight. Sometimes that's people's goals, or losing weight. But what you're expending in an activity is really not that much. It's really not that high, especially if you're pretty trained, like especially if you're used to training regularly. The beautiful part about performance and what makes you better is that the body is designed to adapt to the stimulus. You throw something hard at it, it adapts to that. You throw something a little bit harder, it adapts to that. You throw something a little bit harder, it adapts to that. That is the definition of improved performance. What matters with that in terms of calorie intake, though, is that a part of that improved performance is it becomes more efficient. It does more on less fuel. So if you're training all the time, you've been a trail runner for 15 years and you think that a 10-mile run is burning 1,400 calories, it's not. It's not burning 1,400 calories. Your buddy who just started, maybe he smoked after that 10-mile trail run and hungry for 5 days afterwards. Whereas you get done and you're kind of like, yeah, I'll have a glass of water and some crackers, but you're eating 4,000 calories thinking that it's what you burn. It's not. What we burn in exercise is not that high.
It's crazy. That whole thing about you can't outwork a bad diet is so true. I hate even saying it out loud all the time, but we say it here all the time. It's so true because you can't. And just like you were talking about our good taste, like you can go to Crumble Cookie. One of them cookies is 1,000 calories or more. That's what they say they are. So 1,000 calories. I don't even know how. I mean, my watch says I burn 600 when I run 5 miles, and I'm probably not even doing that because I've been doing it for a while. I got to run 10 miles just to even come close to burning off that one cookie. Yeah. I can eat 5 of those. I mean, no problem. I mean, I could eat 5 of them.
I mean, look, I'm talking about how my tastes have changed over the years, and this is my job. I'm a dietitian and all these things. I love cookies and I love donuts and I love pizza. I love fries. I love chips. It's not like I don't like those things. I do. I love them. They are like, for my birthdays, my wife will always say, "Well, do you want a cake?" It's like, no, buy me. If I'm going to eat anything like that on my birthday, I want chocolate chip cookies. I love them. So I do. It's not like I'm some sort of a mutant who doesn't like these high calorie foods. I do. I just, I have learned, at least for myself personally, it's really important that I manage those, or I'm so far down the trail before I know it that it's hard to come back from. And again, that goes back to your question, have you ever fallen off or whatever? I'm too worried about trying to come back on that I just don't let myself, because I'm worried about what that would look like. And, frankly, being in a deficit or reducing your calorie intake isn't comfortable. I do not like that. And for me, I'd rather tell myself no or about a certain food, or I'd rather tell myself I'm going to stop at 1 instead of 3. I would rather endure that quote unquote suffering than the suffering of 6 months at a calorie restriction because I let myself go, get too far on the other side of those permissions.
Yeah, see, that's crazy because me, I'm just like, ah, I'll just go until next week. I'll just get through this week, all this traveling, all this stuff. I'll go I'm partying, I'm hunting, I'm enjoying myself. And of course, it ends up being like a month later. And then but I can, when I do, and I don't cut back. I mean, you said you eat 2,500 calories. 2,500 calories is what I eat to lose weight. And I'll lose quite a bit of weight pretty quick, but I've got a lot, I've got a lot of fat to lose. I don't know. Maybe I'm losing muscle. Maybe I'm losing water. Who knows? But I'll lose 10 pounds like that. I can just cut out some stuff and I lose it pretty quick. Now, once I get down to that, back down to like the 180, 185, it starts slowing down. And I don't want to be any skinnier than that. Like I want to tone at that point. So in my mind, like right now, I'm just trying to get back to that. Like I've got 15 pounds to get back to that. And then once I do that, I'm going to try to do what you just said and just, eat around 3,000 calories, make sure I'm kind of watching it, make sure I know how I feel. And then I hate tracking. But if I don't track, like, I'm like, I already lost it today because I'm like, oh, in my head, I know that I probably only ate maybe 3,000 calories, but in my head, I'm thinking I ate 4,000, 5,000 calories. It's already gone. I might as well let
Yeah.
it go.
Yeah.
It's tracking is what keeps me like, I don't know. It makes, but I hate it. I hate it. It's so annoying to do.
Yeah. No, it is. It can be for sure. And again, like that's why when we developed the program, made sure that that was a part of maintenance, that for people who did not want to keep tracking, what are some realistic expectations? What are some tools that you can implement that make it to where you can maintain the work that you've invested in without having to be married to the tracker? And part of that is built into the program because you've become so used to doing it that you would almost have to just say, screw it, I'm going to do whatever I want to gain weight. You would almost have to just stop caring and intentionally put on weight to have your weight come back on if you weren't tracking.
Yeah.
So yeah, the tracker is annoying. Like I acknowledge that every time someone calls and expresses interest in the program. And I'm also sure to tell them it's not a lifetime, but there is no better source of accountability. There is nothing better to teach us about nutrition. And there is no more of a surefire way to get to your goal. If you just tell me like, man, I've been eating healthier and been trying to move more and been doing it for 6 months and I just haven't lost any weight, why not? What do you think's going on? I'm going to tell you, you're not in a deficit, but I have no idea why, because I have no idea what's coming in. You can eat the highest quality of all foods on the face of the planet. And if it's in more calories than you need, the weight will not move. I'll never forget, I had a guy, very busy guy. This is unconventional. I'm not suggesting someone does this. It just really speaks to how true this idea of quality and quantity and calories all plays a role. Really busy guy, owned multiple businesses. Every day he would drink protein shakes, eat Nerds candy, and eat dinner with his family. He tracked it all. He lost 25 pounds every day.
Wow.
That's what he ate. 2 protein drinks, and he would eat Nerds in his office. He'd eat dinner with his family. And family dinners were like just common stuff they were already eating, but now he put it into a tracker and we knew he was in a deficit. Unconventional, but you probably won't read any Instagram post or diet about like, oh yeah, start drinking protein shakes and eating Nerds and you'll lose weight. But that's how it works. Right. And like I said, unconventional, yes. Is it ideal? No. And he knew that and I told him that, but he's like, man, I can be consistent with this. And to be honest, when you look at markers of someone's health, it generally will show that a 10% weight reduction will improve most markers, lab markers, all these different markers. So even though unconventional, it was the only thing that he could follow and be consistent with. He dropped 25 pounds, which was 10% of his weight. Markers improved. Even though unideal, can I tell him that he's unhealthy for doing that? I can't, because the labs tell us it was, because he could be consistent. And that is one of the most important things with this, Jake, is that people find something they can be consistent to. I do not care what you can do in 3 months. If in 3 months from now you're abandoning ship and it's all coming back, I don't care. Find something that at 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you can still be doing. And like, the sweet spot when we know that we've tailored someone's program that's going to meet their needs is whenever they say something like, I don't even really feel like I'm doing anything, but the weight's coming off. I'm like, perfect. That's exactly what we want. You're paying more attention. You're being aware. You're being intentional with your choices, but you're not overhauling the planet, but you're seeing progress. Excellent. That's exactly what we want.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, I think people, I mean, I've always just been kind of a guy that just swings for the fences when it's, you know what I mean? Like I'm all in, like I said, all in or all out. And I truly just need to, like, it was like 75 hard was literally just a race to the end. It was a race to the end. And when it ended, it went, and just like everybody says, it just went off the cliff. Again, it probably wouldn't have done that had I not been, in New Zealand and Alaska and Canada and in airports. And traveling is like, when I'm bored, I want to eat, especially if I'm
Yeah.
in a place like an airport or in my truck, like driving down the interstate. Like, you're just like, this sucks. Oh, look, a Wendy's. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, that was the primary driver that got me to 270. Like, I just liked food. I mean, I wasn't an emotional eater necessarily. Like, I'd just walk past the fridge and see a box of pizza and be like, sounds good. Let's do it. All right. Walk past, go to the bathroom, having had already eaten the pizza, walk back by, see a lone bag of trail mix. I'm like, that sounds good. Let's do it. And I mean, I'm just doing this all day, every day. And one of the simple things that I've started when I first began losing weight was, I'm just going to have meals. I'm just going to eat at breakfast, at lunch, and at dinner. And these random grabbings that I'm doing when I walk past anything, like, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not hungry. And I know I'm going to eat meals. I'm getting plenty. I wasn't training a lot at that point or working out a lot. I'm just going to eat meals and start to lose weight, and then that morphed into, okay, well, when I go out to eat, I'm just going to change stuff. Right. And so rather than eating an entire pizza, I would eat 2 slices. I'd go to Wendy's and I'd get grilled chicken. I might take one of the buns off. I'd skip the fries, eat half a baked potato, get water instead of Sprite. So it wasn't like completely overhauling stuff. I didn't not go out to eat at that point. I just started doing these little things that I felt like that just seemed pretty practical, and continued to lose weight, which got me more interested. And then I wanted to know why about nutrition. And that was about the same time that I went back to school and, became a dietitian. But yeah, I didn't start off going crazy. It was just these little things that seemed pretty logical to me all along, and I just started doing them with consistency. And yeah, sure enough, they worked. And thankfully, at the time, like fad diets weren't a thing, and the internet really wasn't that big, that robust that long ago. Like it was starting to gain some popularity, and you could look stuff up. I used Spark People to track. It was the only app at the time. It was web based. Like I didn't have internet on the phone back then. And thankfully so, because who knows what rabbit trails I had gone down if we were living in today's culture. So I didn't like low carb wasn't a thing. Carnivore wasn't a thing. Keto wasn't a thing. I remember eating Cheerios for breakfast and sweet potatoes and fruit and, chicken and burritos and fruit bar, popsicle, like just everyday foods, but trying to control the dose, and lost 140 pounds doing that. And I am so grateful for that whole process, because it helped me to realize, even when I knew from training, professional training, etc., you didn't have to go off this deep end. It only gave me more confidence that people don't need to do that. And it helped me in my own coaching for people to confidently say, you don't need to go down that rabbit hole.
I like that. Like, I truly do. That's how I did it. I mean, people used to make fun of me. I used to make these salads I would just make like a taco salad, but I put cheese whiz on it because it tasted good. But
Yeah.
but I was replacing, the cheese whiz obviously is poison, but like it made the salad taste good. I put some meat, and obviously a big portion of lettuce that is zero, like lettuce, hardly even have to track that. I mean, there's not, but it fills you up.
Yeah.
So I did the same thing. I was just making, it's just those choices. And like, yeah, I really do like that theory. I'm going to try to implement that as hunting season comes, because it'll be no problem for the next 2 months. Like, no problem. Hunting season comes, once like the true hunting is not true hunting, but once the mountain hunting is over and I'm traveling, I'm going to try to just make good decisions. Like you say, just if you want to eat, go eat, but maybe just downsize it. Instead of going to Wendy's and getting a meal, maybe just get a smaller burger, or like you say, a chicken sandwich. Eat that, and then you're good.
Yeah.
Well, I've kept you long enough, but I actually want to do this again, because I have a million questions, and we can talk hunting next time a little bit more. I want to talk to you a little bit about your business too. Just tell people, like, my whole podcast, my whole spiel, my whole everything is earn your hunt. And you got to be, work, family. You got to take care of work and family to go hunting. And you're obviously, hard worker. You're very attentive to your family, it sounds like. And then you get to go hunting. So maybe we'll cover that a little bit too. But just I hope maybe you benefit a little bit out of this. I don't, I have benefited a lot, but maybe if somebody does want to get a hold of you, what's the best route to get with you?
Yeah, everything. I mean, first of all, this is my job, but I love it. I mean, I could talk for days about this, regardless of whether it benefits the business or not. So it's been fun no matter what the outcome is. And I love talking business and family and all of that, and hunting as much as nutrition. So yeah, we'll definitely do part 2 if you want. If anyone is interested in like looking at the resources that we've got, you can kind of find everything under Valley to Peak Nutrition. If you Google that, and that ranges from our website, which has a ton of different resources, to a podcast that we have. We put out episodes every other week. That's on YouTube too, and Instagram and Facebook and all of the different social channels. If you Google Valley to Peak Nutrition, you'll probably find whatever you want.
That's awesome, dude. Well, I appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you next week.